The most crowded rooms can feel the most empty. Not because the people there are false, but because the self you brought is. This is the hidden bargain we strike, again and again. We perform versions of ourselves to escape the loneliness of being seen. And we rarely notice when the performance becomes its own source of solitude. There are 3 patterns to this. 3 ways we construct selves for consumption, mistaking the attention we receive for the connection we need. Each one offers a temporary bridge across isolation. Each one collapses under weight. The first pattern is the curated self. The version edited for maximum legibility. You become the person who gets the reference, who matches the energy, who never quite says the thing that would require explanation. This is not deception in the usual sense. You are not lying. You are selecting. You are foregrounding the traits that travel well, that require no footnotes, that make you easy to like. The curated self succeeds at first. People respond to clarity. They appreciate not having to work too hard to understand you. You collect moments of recognition, of warmth, of feeling known. But the recognition is partial. They are responding to a profile, not a person. And somewhere beneath the performance, you register this. You are being liked for a summary you wrote. The loneliness of the curated self is specific. It is the loneliness of being understood too quickly. Of encountering no friction, no curiosity, no one willing to stay past the highlight reel. You have made yourself accessible. You have not made yourself present. The second pattern is the responsive self. This version does not select traits to display. It selects selves to become. You become whoever the situation requires. The confidant. The wit. The steady presence. The one who asks the right questions. You are not performing a fixed identity. You are performing absence of fixed identity. You are pure adaptation. The responsive self feels like generosity. It feels like social skill, like emotional intelligence, like the ability to meet people where they are. And it is. But it also functions as avoidance. If you are always becoming what is needed, you never have to declare what you are. You never have to risk the specific shape of your own consciousness against the indifference of others. The cost accumulates slowly. You accumulate relationships built on your own disappearance. Each person knows a version of you that was true in the moment of its performance, but does not cohere into anything you recognize as yourself. You are surrounded by people who feel close to you. None of them know the same person. You become the common denominator of your own performances, which is to say, you become nothing specific at all. The third pattern is the suffering self. This one seems different because it appears to reject performance entirely. It presents itself as raw, unedited, authentic. But it is still a selection. Still a construction. It is the self that has learned that certain forms of damage attract certain forms of care. That vulnerability, displayed correctly, functions as currency. The suffering self is not pretending to be wounded. The wounds are real. But the presentation of wounds becomes its own kind of script. You learn which stories land. Which admissions create connection. Which disclosures make people stay. And slowly, your pain becomes your offering. Your damage becomes your credential. You are not performing wellness. You are performing a specific genre of unwellness that you have learned is legible to others. This pattern is perhaps the most difficult to recognize from inside. It feels like honesty. It feels like the opposite of performance. But the suffering self is still managing an image. Still selecting which truths to tell and when. Still hoping that the right display of interior damage will finally bring the right kind of witness. All 3 patterns share a structure. They are attempts to solve the problem of being known without risking the consequences of being seen. Because being seen is dangerous. It is exposure without guarantee. It is the possibility that your actual self, presented without editing, will meet indifference or worse, will meet a mirror that reflects nothing back. The performances are insurance policies against this outcome. They are bets that if you can control the version of yourself that enters the social world, you can control the response. But the insurance has premiums. The curated self pays in the currency of depth. The responsive self pays in the currency of continuity. The suffering self pays in the currency of healing, because the performance requires the wound to remain visible. None of these currencies are infinite. All of them eventually deplete. What remains when the performance stops? This is the question the patterns cannot answer. They are designed to prevent exactly this moment. The moment when there is no audience, no situation requiring adaptation, no wound to display. The moment when you are simply present with yourself, without the structure of performance to organize your experience. This moment is often mistaken for emptiness. It feels like failure. Like the collapse of something essential. But it is not emptiness. It is silence. The silence that precedes genuine speech. The silence that makes it possible to ask what you actually want, what you actually think, what you would actually say if no response were guaranteed. The performance patterns are not sins. They are strategies developed in response to real conditions. The world does not make unperformed selves easy to maintain. There are genuine costs to being seen. Rejection becomes specific when it is your specific self that is rejected. Indifference becomes pointed when you have offered something pointed. The performances are attempts to manage these risks, and they succeed at managing them. They fail at producing what they promise. What they promise is connection. But connection requires two specific selves encountering each other. Not two performances. Not two adaptations. Not two curated versions negotiating a space between them. The performances can produce proximity. They can produce familiarity. They can produce the feeling of being known. They cannot produce the fact of it. There is a difference between being recognized and being known. Recognition is pattern matching. It is the other person locating you in their existing categories. You are like someone they knew. You remind them of something. You fit a type they understand. This is what the performances are designed to produce. They make you legible. They make you recognizable. Being known is different. It is slower. It requires the other person to remain in contact with your actual unfolding, without the comfort of category. It requires you to remain in contact with your own unfolding, without the comfort of selection. It is less efficient than performance. It is more costly in the short term. It produces something the performances cannot access. The choice between performance and presence is not a choice made once. It is made continuously. In each interaction, there is a moment before the performance begins. A moment when you have not yet decided which version to bring. This moment is easy to miss. The performances start automatically, trained by years of reinforcement. But the moment exists. And it can be extended. Extending this moment is the practice. Not eliminating performance, which is probably impossible, but creating space around it. Noticing when you are selecting. Noticing when you are adapting. Noticing when you are offering damage as credential. These noticing are themselves forms of presence. They are the self observing its own construction. This observation does not stop the construction, but it changes the relationship to it. The goal is not to become some pure authentic self, stripped of all performance. There may be no such self. The goal is to become aware of the bargain. To know when you are paying the premium. To recognize that the loneliness you are fleeing through performance is not solved by more performance, only delayed and transformed. The final pattern, if there is one, is not a pattern at all. It is the willingness to be seen without guarantee. To present a self that has not been tested for market response. To risk the specific indifference that comes to specific people, rather than the generalized loneliness that comes to everyone wearing masks. This is not a solution. It is a direction. The performances will continue. The patterns will persist. But they can be held more lightly. They can be recognized as strategies rather than identities. As responses to conditions rather than definitions of self. The hidden bargain is hidden because we make it in secret, even from ourselves. We agree to be partially known in exchange for being generally liked. We agree to manage our own visibility in exchange for managing our own safety. These are not foolish agreements. They are understandable. But they are agreements. And they can be renegotiated. What would it mean to show up without the performance? Not as a permanent state. Not as an identity. But as a possibility. As a moment extended into minutes, into hours, into the occasional conversation where you do not know in advance what you will say. Where you do not know in advance who you will be. Where the risk of being seen is accepted not because it is safe, but because the alternative has been tried, and found insufficient. The loneliness of being seen is real. But it is not the only loneliness. There is also the loneliness of never being seen at all. Of accumulating relationships built on versions of yourself that no longer exist, if they ever did. Of sitting in crowded rooms feeling the precise distance between your performed self and your actual one, and knowing that this distance is the real source of the emptiness. The performances are not enemies. They are attempts. They deserve recognition as attempts. But they can be recognized without being obeyed. There is space between the impulse to perform and the act of performing. In that space, something else is possible. Something slower. Something less certain. Something that might, eventually, become connection.